There was outrage in our station yesterday, and Lauren's a little mad at my melodrama before the break.
Yes.
But I think caring for small children is a pro-life issue. I think it is. Womb to tomb, baby.
Well, yeah, if you're going quality of life and not life or death as your definition of pro-life.
Yeah, I am. I am going that way. Quality of life matters. Can you share with us what, like, we were all ready to just, like, cry with you, like, hold you and weep. What happened to you guys?
So we had a babysitter starting in January, obviously because I was coming back to work. And she worked for us for maybe 5 weeks or something. And over those 5 weeks, she slowly kept reducing her hours. It's 3 hours in the morning from 9 to noon.
So you have 3 hours that cover you and Eddie in your overlapping jobs.
Right. So it's from 9 to noon, Monday through Friday. And slowly over those 5 weeks, she just kept reducing her hours or would take a day like out of the rotation or whatever. And then she gave her 2 weeks notice and we were like, okay, that's fine. And then her first week of that 2 weeks, she took off 2 days and then was supposed to come the final Friday. And on Thursday night, she said, I'm not coming anymore at all. So then we had a couple weeks where I had to find a new babysitter. So then we did. And I was just very clear about, we really need someone reliable that's going to stick around, that's stable. We've already had a lot of change for our 3-year-old. We just are looking for something stable. So if you're not able to commit to doing this for a long time, I don't have any hurt feelings. I'd rather you tell me now. They agreed to that. Yesterday they told us they're quitting.
Oh, wow.
And when's their last day?
Wednesday. So they gave us 2 days notice. And you may think maybe it's our problem. The first one was not our problem. They were a young person and just not able to keep track of their schedule very well.
Yeah, a college student, yeah.
Yeah. And then this other one, they have a different job that's more important to them than this. They're kind of using taking care of our kids as supplement to their other job. And their other job was needing morning hours, and they couldn't because they were at our house. So they decided to go with the other job they're more passionate about.
Well, somebody might go, okay, easy solution. Don't worry about this babysitter business. Put your boys in daycare.
Yeah, so the first problem with that is that my oldest is already in a preschool. That's afternoon preschool. So that would mean taking him out of his school now and finding a new school, changing his entire routine because he's used to afternoon. He's used to his mornings at home and afternoon at school. So this would mean changing his entire routine because I would need both in a daycare / preschool in the morning time. He's already established friendships at his preschool. He already has a teacher. And like I said, he's already had a ton of change in his life. I don't really want to pull him from his school right now.
But that can't be the only reason.
No, the other reason is because it's outrageously expensive.
What do you mean? It's no big deal. Outrageously expensive.
It's not
you got 2 incomes. Come
it's
on.
not so expensive that if we were to do that, me quitting my job would like make it all even. We still would like me having a job makes us, more money than us just not to work. But it would put us we wouldn't be able to pay our mortgage. That's what it would do.
Because mortgages are expensive these days.
Mortgages are expensive these days, and so is daycare.
Yeah, in fact, I didn't realize this, but it's become, like, childcare has become a major statewide issue. So Cleveland.com, I saw an article that dealt with this. Now, as recently as a few months ago, there was very little action in the state legislature to address major issues with Ohio's child care system. What are the major issues? Skyrocketing costs is what they call it. Not just higher or slightly higher, skyrocketing costs. The annual cost of child care for an infant in the state is now nearly $10,000.
Wow.
For an infant. Problems finding and keeping child care staff. Another issue, creating more child care options in parts of the state that just don't have them. Now, it's become such an issue that it's actually reached front and center in the state legislature. Recent developments suggest that childcare reforms have picked up steam among some key backers. For example, Governor DeWine outlined new initiatives meant to expand access to childcare during the State of the State address. Business leaders have spotlighted the problems as a workforce issue. The article goes into major explanations of this. Business owners, Chamber of Commerce, very concerned because people can't work because they can't afford daycare.
Right.
And we need people to work. Republican state lawmakers who hold a commanding supermajority in both state House chambers have introduced legislative ideas aimed at fixing some of the problems in the system. So this is not a Lauren problem where, Lauren and Eddie just need to be more responsible. I don't think I've met more responsible people than Lauren and Eddie.
And also, it doesn't help. We both work at a nonprofit. So we're not in, the marketplace.
Right. You're not out there, rolling in your dough.
Yeah.
Like you both work to live.
Yes.
Which is what my wife and I do.
Mm-hmm.
She was a stay-at-home mom, and it became unaffordable because that's the way the world works today. So what are we going to do about this is the question. Now, state lawmakers are talking about it. How are we going to handle this? Because remember, it's up to $10,000 a year for a baby.
Yeah.
I did the math, if you'd like, from actual, when I was doing my research.
Yeah, please.
From actual daycares around this area.
Yeah.
For 2 kids, it would be $2,800 a month.
What?
Mm-hmm. And you'd
almost
be like,
$3,000 a month?
Yes, and you would say, oh, but you're only there 3 hours, Lauren. Most of them don't care. It's a flat rate. It doesn't matter if you're there. They're like, sure, you can have them here part-time, but it's the same rate as for a full-time kid.
Yeah, and see, I've heard teachers have the same problem, right? Because you can't just pay for the school year.
Yeah.
They end up paying for the summer, and they'll take their kids to daycare a few days a week because they're paying for it. They might as well do it.
Yeah.
It would cost $3,800 a month?
$2,800 a month.
$2,800 a month.
So that's $33,600 a year. And you also have to pay an enrollment fee as well as an education fee. Which
of course.
I'm not sure why that's different than the tuition. But that was at 2 different ones. They were both $2,800. And one we were looking at that actually allowed half-day care, that you could pay for half-day. It still wasn't worth it. It was a little bit less, but not much.
Now, somebody would probably say, oh, well, you know what that probably was. That was probably some sort of elite private institution where children wear little suits and they're served by butlers.
No, those were like the cheapest I could find.
The cheapest you could find?
Yes, of actual daycare centers.
Would be $33,000 a year for two kids. That's a problem.
Yeah. And I don't know, like sometimes people will do in-home care, and I don't know that they're going to be that much cheaper. They might be a little less, but they probably make the research like you've done and say, okay, if they're going to pay this much to be institutionalized, wouldn't they prefer to be at a home with a real person, and then just mark it down $100 or something and say, oh, there.
Yeah, and with that, you don't necessarily know if they're certified, if they have the right qualifications to be caring for children, and
you read the horror stories.
Yeah.
So, what are the state's proposed solutions to this problem? There's some out there. We'll chat about what they are here in just a minute. We're chatting about something I think is, from a lot of different angles, a pro-life issue, but Ohio leaders are finally starting to tackle, as Cleveland.com calls it, the state's childcare crisis. Again, crisis. It can cost $10,000 a month to have an infant cared for. There's a shortage of childcare staff, and there's a shortage of facilities. So the question might be if the state's talking about how to solve this crisis. Because, and by the way, if you're just tuning in, business leaders are very concerned because they can't hire people because people can't go to work because they can't afford to have their kids cared for.
And that might help explain why we see help wanted signs everywhere.
That's right.
Because there are so many people tied to the home because they can't get out.
Now, so let's look at some of the solutions proposed. Governor DeWine announced earlier this month that he's creating a voucher program to cover child care expenses for Ohio households making up to 200% of the poverty line, which is $60,000 per year for a family of 4. A move that will cover costs for about 8,000 more children in the state. But that means, keep in mind, that is a 4-person family that their combined income is $60,000.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you that there is a lot of families making more than that are barely making it. You know what I mean? Like you'd have to plunge yourself into poverty to get the voucher. The governor's also said that he would use $85 million in reallocated federal funding to offer grants for childcare providers to improve and expand their facilities. That doesn't help moms.
No.
But it'd be nice. You get like a nice playground at the facility.
I mean, I think the idea is that it opens up the possibility for more kids to be cared for at the center. Because
maybe,
Lauren, correct me, I think there's an actual shortage of spots at daycares.
Yeah, there's wait lists. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. That at this point, though, right? What they would do is have more room to charge $33,000 a year for 2 kids. You know, it's just I hate to be so cynical, but it doesn't help much. Next one, here's another solution. At the State House, Republican lawmakers are putting forward bills designed to make childcare more accessible through collaboration with private companies and nonprofits. Check this out. This is fascinating. House Bill 484 from a couple of different House representatives would provide more than $10 million in state grants to help employers build new childcare facilities, renovate existing facilities, and or partner with childcare, local governments, and nonprofits to make more childcare available to workers.
Yeah, if you've got a big enough company, having a childcare on site might be a good solution for you.
Yeah, and what the House is saying is, listen, we'll put in some money if business owners will help subsidize childcare as well.
Mm-hmm.
Soon to be introduced twin bills in the Ohio House and Senate, meanwhile, would create a statewide program under which workers of participating employers would only have to pay 1/3 of their childcare costs, with their employer and the state covering the other 2/3. The legislation, which would cost the state about $150 to $200 million per year, is modeled on similar tri-share programs in Michigan and some other states. Literally, it would be the state says, we'll pay 1/3 if the employer will pay 1/3. And then, I'm not doing the math right, and then you pay 1/3.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea behind that, if it could work out. Because, the employer is going to benefit by having those people, those women, I'm going to say, because it's primarily women who are tasked with the child care.
By the way, Ohio is close to last among U.S. states when it comes to subsidizing childcare. We're one of the worst. Brutal.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Here's where the storyline frustrates me. You know what you hear more of when you hear people complain about childcare costs? Work harder. Get a better job. That's the solution. Pull up your bootstraps, Lauren. Grab those straps, start pulling. You can't even.
Yeah, I have nothing to say.
But I'm not wrong. This is what people do. They start hollering at employees to just work harder. Meanwhile, inflation goes up 8 to 10%, and wages go up half that if you're lucky.
Right. I mean, we've basically taken a pay cut over the last couple of years. Raises are nowhere near keeping up with inflation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you need to get a job just to be able to afford daycare, but you can't get a job until you can afford daycare.
And then you get mad at me because I'm working harder and not being at home with my kids. And I'm not being a good mom.
Right.
I'm not. I mean, you're saying you, this isn't this
Right.
fictitious person that yells at moms.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember the governor proposed increasing the amount you can make in order to get subsidies, which was, again, about $60,000 a year for a family of 4,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, that breaks down to $5,000 a month is $60,000
Mm-hmm.
minus housing costs, which rent and mortgage, we're talking $1,200 a month.
At least. I mean, I think those days are gone.
And then you got to eat, and you got to have a car to get to work, and you got to pay for gas.
And insurance.
Mm-hmm.
You see how there's no money left?
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, he says we should move it up to 200% of the poverty line. Currently, it's for 142% of the poverty line, or $42,000 a year for a family of 4. The only way to get subsidies right now is if a family of 4 is generating $42,600 a year. Otherwise, you're on your own, baby.
That's the poverty line, or is that?
That's 142% of the poverty line.
So poverty line is really low.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people living in the midst of that.
Yeah.
I think we also need to talk about why is the poverty line so low when arguably people that are
Yeah.
making significantly more than that are still struggling, not because of poor choices they've made, just because of the cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
The governor's voucher program is being paid for with one-time federal coronavirus relief money. So for it to continue in future years, state lawmakers would have to find a way to cover the program's expected cost of about $140 million a year. He's not even using funds that are going to be consistent. He's using secret funds, not secret, but like extra funds.
Special, yeah.
And so what would that mean? They'd have to increase
Taxes. Nobody wants to hear that.
Don't increase my taxes.
Yeah, especially a lot of us older folks will be like, we raised our kids. Why do I want to pay money to raise your kids? Which is the wrong attitude altogether. You got to think not about your nuclear family, but the entirety of the American population. And if you want America to continue to grow and be civilized, you've got to have good child care as a start to that. When kids grow up with unsteady or unsure home situations and child care situations, they're much more likely to become unsteady citizens.
Yeah.
And join a gang looking for the family that they didn't have because mom and dad were working and they were latchkey kids or whatever. It's important that we consider this, all of us, even old folks like me.
Yeah, and I mean, nobody wants their taxes to go up. I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't want people in Lauren's situation. That seems unreasonable in a society. I don't know. I get frustrated by it because, I mean, can we get over the lazy storyline at least? Can we get over Lauren's generation is not working hard enough? Can we just get past that? I don't know if we can.
Yeah. And I don't hear people say that anymore, except you quoting unnamed sources. But
Well, I hear people all the time, get a better job. Why don't you get a better education? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why do you have your college debt? Stop having your college debt.
I don't have
Because you
college
told
debt.
me to get an education so I could make more money.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think college debt should go back on the banks myself. They were foolish enough to allow this to go on. I think they should take the hit. And it may crash a few banks. I don't care. Dave will come in and tell me how wrong I am in a moment, but his philosophy would take it out of the endowments of the colleges that let the kids come in and take all that money out. But
I mean, when you can get state lawmakers to call something like this a crisis, it's a problem.
mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of opportunity here for churches, especially because there's parts of the state, and I'm guessing in more rural areas where there's no options for families. It used to be that churches did childcare.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we got a text on this.
Yeah, it says, I live in a rural area, and many area churches are running affordable preschools and after-school programs.
Praise the Lord.
My kids go to daycare 3 days a week for 2.5 hours, and it's only $80 per month at a church. Churches should step up.
That's affordable.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a shortage of
Better
people.
than $2,800.
Right? And it's not that complicated for a church to get some state funding. And it doesn't take even that much work for people to volunteer and donate food for lunches and snacks.
Yeah, and if you've got the church building and you're already keeping it at a minimum heat, during the winter and cool during the summer, it's not going to cost you that much more in utilities.
Mm-hmm.
and you get the right volunteers or staff that aren't going to charge, a lot of money to be there, but just are there because they love being with kids. And of course, you're going to have to vet them with the police and do background checks and everything, but that's normal these days.
And what's interesting is we're going to pay for it regardless, right? I mean, either we're going to pay for it by donations at church or in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Or in messed up kids because
Yes.
mom and dad had to work too much to afford their daycare that they were never around.
Yeah, this one makes me mad.
Yeah.
Mad for my friend and people just like her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry you guys have to deal with this. It's maddening.
Yeah. And I was talking to our friend Kathleen yesterday, and she used to live in Chicago. And she said, something I realized is that in Chicago, nannying is like a career. It's like a profession.
Mm-hmm.
You meet people and you know people. That's their job. And here it's not like that. It's just like an extra cash kind of thing. It's not people are willing to do it for the long term. I had friends and knew people who were nannying for the same family for years. And that you just don't find that here. So.
And we're one of the worst in the country for subsidies.
Yeah, right.
So it's something to pray about. I think if you're in leadership in a church or you just have a voice in your church, this could be a time where churches really could show up in the state of Ohio and say, look at what we can do. We know we've got a crisis. We've seen it. Everyone's saying it's one. We can help solve this problem.
And you run a well-run daycare, the parents of those children are going to come Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
You better
Because
believe it.
you've shown
Yes.
the love of Christ to them and their family.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
they'll come to your church and maybe they'll find Christ if they don't know him already. A great outreach.
You have a lovely building that you've paid for that you don't use during the week for
Yeah,
the
it's
most part.
Empty
Mm-hmm.
all week.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
Do you ever find yourself missing the More Run moment in the morning and you wish you could just go back and watch it again? Well, now you can. So be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a More Run moment.